Okay, I'm Kevin Wadsworth. I was in the golden years of the band, as it's affectionately called. I was the solo horn player. I started when I was 14 years old, and I've got the privilege of being able to say that I really am the youngest player, despite the grey beard. I am the youngest player ever to join Black Dyke Band. I was 13 years old when I auditioned just before Christmas. My birthday was just before Christmas. And I started with the band in January 1966. So I have that very, very proud honour of being the youngest person in the band's history. I started on second horn, and I came from a band in Huddersfield called the Lindley Band. I was noticed by a wonderful cornet player called Jim Shepherd through a national youth band course. Jim remembered me, and when a vacancy became available in the band, Gordon Sutcliffe, the previous solo horn player, left the band, and the horn section was shuffled around, and a second horn position became available, and I was asked to audition for it. So I came up into this very room on 3 occasions, I think, and played with the band for the first night, and then was asked to go away and prepare a solo piece and come back and perform in front of the band, which was a daunting task. But at 14 years old, it's not as daunting as it would have been if I'd have been 30 years old, I think, through the ignorance of youth, so on the enthusiasm of youth. So that's a little bit about my origins with Black Dyke Band. As a baby, I was brought up with brass bands. I was taken as a baby, an infant, to brass band contests because my father was a very fine euphonium player with Brighouse and Brastrick just down the road at the time of my birth. And he used to play his euphonium to put me to sleep as a baby, so I had no chance really. I was always going to be into brass music. So that's how it started, and as a young boy I was taken to brass band contests, primarily contests, and I learned to associate the repertoire at that time of contest music as a young child, which is pretty bizarre. I could play with anything as long as it was a cornet. All my friends were out playing football and things like that. You can go and you can do your practice in cornet. So I started when I was 6, and then I retired from playing when I was 7. And then I came out of retirement when I was 8, and then took it a little bit more seriously. And the rest is what it was, really. It goes back to those very early days when I first got any common sense at all as a youngster. I saw Black Dyke at contests, and just awesome. They were such a superb professional outfit, and they stood out from the crowd. And of course, as a boy, you are influenced by what you hear as well as what you see. But everybody talked about Black Dyke, and so you think, this must be good, and it was good. And it triggered something in me at a very early age. From being 8 or 9 onwards, I knew that Black Dyke was such a great musical ensemble. It would be something to strive for. Favourite highlight?
Memory.
Oh, God, so many. So many. Privileged to do so many things. Meet so many fine, famous, fine people. To be an ambassador for the town, on occasions for the country, when the band went abroad. The first time the band went abroad, it was a total disaster. I'm sure that someone will remember the time the band went to Roubaix, and we were inexperienced travellers, and we flew from Leeds Bradford down to Heathrow, and then from Heathrow to Lille, I think. But 8 of us decided to go for a meal at Heathrow Airport, not realising that unlike getting off one bus and straight onto another bus, there's distance, there's transfer times, there's different check-ins, which is so naive. And with about 15 minutes to go before the second flight, we thought we ought to make a move now, not realising that we were miles away. And thank goodness Jim Shepherd was one of the 8, John Slinger, David Essex, David Horsfield, myself, and a couple of others. We missed the plane, basically. And we ran up descending escalators. If you've ever seen John Slinger with his baritone running up a descending escalator, it was the funniest sight, but at the time it was pretty serious. And we got within about 20 yards of the airplane door, and the plane just slid away. We were part of a town twinning ceremony in France, and the mayor of Bradford was in the cockpit of the plane looking frantic as we just stood helpless. I was the only one, a schoolboy, I was the only one who spoke any French, but I couldn't understand the answers. So it was all quite a traumatic occasion, but with hindsight now, it's one of the great moments of banding, but musically, some wonderful experiences, wonderful. 1972, wonderful experience. I was quite fortunate because at that time I had moved away from the band to go to college, university, and my father was heartbroken that I wanted to leave the band to go to train to be a teacher. He wanted me to stay with the band and be a cobbler and mend shoes. I was always good with my hands. I've always been good with my hands. And he wanted me to become a cobbler. He said there's always going to be a need for shoes in life. But I stuck to my guns and I went to train to be a teacher, which meant I had to leave the band and I went down to Winchester in Hampshire, during which time I became a founding member of the City of London band under the direction of Jeff Brand, which was a great experience. But when the band were going to Canada, a vacancy became available. Someone couldn't go, one of the home players couldn't go. So I was asked if I would fill in and stand in for a job with the band. I said, well, yeah, of course, well, where is it? He said, it's a fortnight in Canada. So I thought, I'll think about that. So I thought about it for half a second and said yes, and it was a glorious time. A festival of brass with Eric Paul, Geoffrey Brand, Stanley Boddington, Harry Mortimer at the Skylon Tower based in Niagara Falls. We did a joint concert, then all the bands, Manchester Co-op, Fairies and Black Dyke, went their own ways to different parts of Northern America and then came back for a grand finale concert. And it was a wonderful affair. Magical, magical. They always say your first is your best in life. It was my third national final in 1967. I played my first national final in 1965 with Lindley Band. I was 12 years old. And then I joined Black Dyke. I was 13 years old with Lindley. Then I joined Black Dyke in 1966 under Uncle Jiggs, Major Jaeger. Wonderful, wonderful character. I'd not been in the band long before he came up for the area. I joined at the beginning of the year. He came up to take the band at the area contest in March with rehearsals prior to that. So I was warned and advised, no, I was warned that Jiggs, Major Jaeger, was coming to the rehearsal. A fine British gentleman with a bowler hat and an umbrella, and spoke beautiful Queen's English. And I was frightened to death of him. And the band, they got so much respect for this charming man. And he says, you all call me Jiggs, he said, and you, young man, you call me Uncle. Oh, God. And Uncle. And the blokes, of course, the blokes in the band just loved it. They just fell about laughing. And true to his word, I had to say, excuse me, uncle. When I was referring to the music, I had to call him uncle. And the elder statesmen of the band, Peter McNabb, Billy Gibson and the likes, the characters of the band, they just loved this young kid calling the professional conductor uncle. But he was a magical, he was a magician. Didn't always get the success that he deserved, but it was a life-changing experience for me to work under such a fine musician who was in charge of the Irish Guards. And at 14 years old, to be in a position of responsibility, putting your part in with such an eminent musician in front of you. I grew up very quickly, and Black Dyke is responsible for that. It must have been a big decision for the band to take on a raw, young 14-year-old boy as a working member of the band. And my father, who knew the likes of Peter McNabb and Billy Gibson and a lot of the guys in the band, my father passed the parental responsibility whilst I was with the band onto them, and which they accepted. And it was made clear to me in front of them all that they laid the law down. And they did say, if you step out of line, we become your father. And you know what that means. And as a young kid in 1966, it did as well. And if I tried to step out of line at all, they put me firmly in my place. And that's why I grew up so quickly. And I had a very privileged, I call it a very privileged upbringing as a youngster. And I was wearing the jacket, I was wearing the beautiful gold badge with the stag. I was an ambassador for the band. Not all that long, out of short trousers in those days. And the funny thing with the horn section, the solo horn player was a chap called Brian Wood, who was 6'6". I was 14 years old and not the tallest kid on the block. So the horn section just went down. When he stood up at the end of a concert to acknowledge the applause, it looked ridiculous because there was a solo horn player, giant of a man, and this little squirt at the bottom. It really did look funny. And we played a piece of music called The Three Bears, which is quite a difficult piece of music. And of course it was the obvious thing to refer to the horn sections as Three Bears, with the daddy bear, and I got it in the neck again. There's a daddy bear there, and down there we've got the baby bear, and the blokes loved that as well. So I took my fair share of stick, but I loved every moment of it, and I've got nothing but thanks to the band for bringing me on so well. My first and my last, 67, was Journey to Freedom, with the magician in front of the band. I used that term for jigs, and he was. And then along came this guy called Brand, Jeffrey Brand. Nobody had heard of Jeffrey Brand. But as soon as he walked in, the language of his baton to the players just was so exciting. Wonderful. So he took the band in 1967 on Journey to Freedom, and it was a spectacular performance. And my first win, it was my third London, and my first win, and that was great. And then 35 years later, when I was not with Black Dyke, then I was with Brighouse and Rastrick on solo horn, playing the Moon of Mexico. We won that as well, and that was an achievement at the other end of the time scale of my life, musically. So I think 67, Journey to Freedom, and Moon of Mexico 35 years later with Brighouse. But the little bit in between was just sensational.
Characters.
It's often been said that Black Dyke, it's said by people outside of Black Dyke, within brass banding, that Black Dyke never used to have fun, did they? They were too much of a business, they were too businesslike, and that's just could not be further from the truth. The band was full of characters. The main thing was when the instruments went up and the beat went down, it was serious hard work. But in between times, I've already mentioned Peter McNabb, who got a lovely deep bass voice. He was a bass player. Very Yorkshire, very broad Yorkshire, very deep voice, very good at telling stories. And in my early years of the band, he was the compere for concerts. The conductor didn't do the comparing. Peter came out from the back, put his instrument down, and compared the concerts, then went back and played his part as well. He was a great character. Billy Gibson, cornet player. Jack Brooke. These are magical names to anybody who knows anything about Black Dyke. Great character. John Slinger, fantastic musician. Not the easiest person to get on with. He got his own agenda, but what a magnificent player. You give him an instrument and he can just play it brilliantly well. And he was a lovely man. And he did some wonderful arrangements for the Black Dyke Octet. A lot of manuscript. I don't know where they've gone nowadays, but some brilliant arrangements. And Jack Brooke, John Slinger, Fred Ellis, charming guy, my sort of age, wonderful cornet player, ambassador for the band, all worked at the firm at Foster's. John Clay worked at Foster's. Brian Broadbent worked at Foster's. So many people worked. But the strange thing is, as opposed to now, everybody in the band they were professionals at something else. They all had a skill, a job, a training. We had engineers, we had guys working in the mill, we had painters and decorators. Peter McNabb worked for the gas board. John Clough was an organ builder and tuner. Also joiners, dental technicians. But everybody in this band had a full-time occupation. And then at the end of the day, they went home, changed, or even didn't change, grabbed a sandwich, came back, and then became brilliant musicians. Nowadays, most of the players go to university or to the conservatoires and study how to play a euphonium or a trombone or a cornet. And that's what they do. We did it in our spare time, and we're still at the top of our game. I would say nowadays the young modern player technically is far advanced to what we were, but there's a payoff to that. Musically, I don't think they are as musical as we were. So I would say the modern Black Dyke can probably beat the golden years of Black Dyke technically. In terms of music, musicality, I think it would be a close run thing. Somebody once asked the question, would the band of the 60s and the 70s beat the modern Black Dyke now in contest? And the answer came back, well, probably, but it would take us about half an hour to get our lip back in first.
Great players.
Great players, great characters, but they were all professional in other things. Challenges and difficulties. The band was the committee, but when I started, I was told by the senior members, hear all and say note in committee meetings, and that's exactly what I did. The good thing was that every member, we played, we rehearsed, we put our instruments down, we all sat back, and then we had the committee meeting, and it took as long as it took. We discussed engagements, we discussed the running of the band and anything else associated. And hands went in the air, and that was total democracy. And for a long time, my hand stayed firmly underneath my knees for a long time, until eventually I got the courage to put my hand up, or not. But that's a process of development as a youngster within the band. But it was a great system, and they always got the right decision, and everybody went with that. Not everybody agreed with it, but everybody went with the majority, and that's the right thing to do, of course. Unlike an external committee who tell the workers of the band what they're going to do. The band decide, we're not going to do that, we don't want to. We do want to do that. And that's why you got such good dedication, because they chose to do it. Well, I've already said that Black Dyke is responsible for my rapid development from childhood to adulthood, because I was with adults, doing an adult job, performing to hundreds, thousands of people. So you've got to get your act together. You've got to. You just got to be an adult and mature, and that changed me considerably. It increased my confidence, and I've just got so much to be thankful to the band for. I see people of my age now who I went to school with, who, yeah, they did that. They all say, I wish we'd have got involved in music like you did. We'd like to have gone around the world like you did. We'd like to have played in big venues like you did. We'd like to have met special people like you did. So, there's your answer. It's always been very important. It's the icon, the epitome of brass banding. It's the one band. It's the Manchester United of music. Even if they're not winning everything all the time, they're still the Man United, and it's the band that everybody wants to play for. It's the one band. Choirs now in Wales are doing remarkably well, but given the choice, I would say, if you ask the normal, if you ask brass band players in lower section bands, which band would you like to play with, Choirs or Black Dyke? I think it would be a no-brainer. It's the one that everybody wants to play for. Every schoolboy wants to play for Man United. Every amateur football player on a Sunday morning would really like to play with Man United. And every brass band player would really like to play with Black Dyke. Not so much banding in general. There are too many bands struggling for players. In my day, it was a cornet or a brass instrument or a football. Now it's computers, it's IT, it's games, it's electronic games. There's so much now. Instant satisfaction. Press a button and you get the result. Electronic entertainment has taken its toll on the hard-working perseverance of a brass instrument that doesn't come by just pressing a button. You slave away and chip away till you start to improve. The results are much greater because it's coming from within, whereas electronic stuff, it is what it is. It's programmed by someone. So children now, youngsters, I think they've got more things to take them away into different directions for a quick fix, and then they put that down and they go somewhere else, as opposed to saying, right, I will dedicate a chunk of my life to doing this on that brass instrument, that violin, that piano. You have to dedicate a chunk of your life if you want to get good. Whereas with electronic games, I'll play that for a couple of hours and then I'll try something else. I think that's a big change in society, and the dedication and the time involved. Everybody's busy people now. Everyone's busy and they've all got things to do. In our day, the ghosts of this room, we made time. The marriages, when you develop into a marriage, the marriage comes second. You know, it costs There is a cost to playing with a band like this, and that can be a marriage. There is a few of us that it did. My second daughter, my wife went into labour on a Sunday afternoon as we got a band job on Sunday evening. How inconvenient is that? I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. Instead of going on the bus with the band, I'll go in the car and I'll ring you at half time, and we're only in North Allerton in North Yorkshire. So as soon as we're finished, I'll come back in the car. And that was really generous of me. And by the time I got home, I had to rush her into hospital. And it was fine because we've still got 30 minutes before my daughter was born. But that's the dedication that we had in those days. Bandsmen used to look in the diaries to see when they could get married, because they can't get married that weekend, we've got a job on. Can't get married that weekend, we've got a weekend job away. And that happened all the time. You know, my daughter was born, well, I still did the concert, but it was close. It reminds me, as I sit here looking around, the curtain to the side there, the night that Peter Lambert, who was the president of the band and the director of John Foster's and Sons Limited, very British, ex-army, beautiful spoken gentleman. He stood in front of the band at the window there where the conductor stands, and he said, "Gentlemen, I would like to introduce you to your new musical director." And he pointed to the curtain in the archway there, which the curtains drawn closed, and the curtains opened. And Peter Parks walked round the corner, and we all thought, who the heck is this bloke? And he walked, he got a particular walking style at Peter, Major Parks. And his head, he sort of stooped his neck, and he walked in front of the band and made a little speech about how he's director of the Grenadier Guards and what a privilege it was to play for the band and to conduct the band. And so he got a magnificent stick technique, and as his arms went up, we thought, this guy has got something as well. So we were very lucky. We had great professional conductors. And he started conducting the band, and he said, that's absolutely great, that's great. And he did 2 rehearsals, and he said nothing but, wonderful, wonderful, that's great, excellent, wonderful. And eyes around the band started to look around thinking, this is not what we want. And at half-time interval on, I think, his 3rd rehearsal, bear in mind, I'm still only young. I'm the youngster of the band. Just then I said, "Major Parks, can I have a word with you?" And he said, "Yes, young Kevin, of course you can. What's that?" I said, "Look, would you mind not saying how good we are? We know we're good, but you're not here for that. You're here to tell us when we're not good." And he went, "Right." And I thought, what the heck have I done here? Big mouth, big mouth. And at that point, he changed. And the second half of the rehearsal, he then got stuck into us. And we all went, this is what we want. The great thing about that was that a guy of such massive experience listened to a little squirt with no experience. And that's the way the band was. Everybody was on an equal. Everybody was on a level. And we worked for each other. And that's the magic of Black Dyke. We worked for each other. Jim came from New Biggin on Sea, up in Northumberland. Played with Carlton Main, then joined Black Dyke. Played with Black Dyke and led by blood, sweat and tears. He drove the cornet section. Every member of that cornet section was under Jim's control, and Jim was a workaholic, and he directed the cornet section by example. He never stopped playing. David Pratt was Jim's second man, bumper up. Pratty was a brilliant player, but Jim never stopped playing. He was a workaholic, a wonderful technician, great leader of the band, great leader, because as a musician you've got the conductor in full focus, and you're all, where I was sitting, I was always aware of the principal cornet in that part of my view. And Jim was always working the band, and between the two, the players of the band knew exactly what to do. And Jim directed, he drove the cornet section especially, but what a great example of a hard worker. Then the band divided and Jim went to Verstel Brass with 1 or 2, and then Philip came in, and that was a different era altogether. It was a different attitude. I played with Philip in the National Youth Band many years previously, and Philip was a solo cornet player in the National Youth Band. Everybody in the National Youth Band of 100 players auditioned for their positions each and every course, with one exception. And Philip never auditioned. He just stood back. In fact, I think he even auditioned the cornet players within the section. And when the National Youth Band, for their first rehearsal, the list was read out, you play that position, you play that position, you play that position. The entire band was filled up with one empty chair, and then it was expected that Philip would walk in to the applause of all the band, and he sat down as though it was a concert. And he projected himself as always really a professional on a concert. And his connection with the rest of the band was slightly different. It was always, aloof is the wrong word, but detached is correct. He led the band by his playing. His playing was unbelievable. Different sound, completely different sound. Sweet, melodious, delicate, artistic. Jim was strong, powerful, directing, but still a wonderful technician, but really quite different. But that showed in the personalities as well. Jim was one of the blokes, and Philip was always half a pace behind because of his position within the band. And it was his interpretation of that position that he adopted that sort of technique. I think he's been like that throughout life. He's a great player. He's always been a great player, still a great player. But in terms of personality, they were very, very different. And Philip is still a very different personality within the banding movement to many people. He's retained this I'm not going to use the word aloof, because he's not aloof, but he's used this half-pace, invisible step backwards, and he's retained that all his life. Still a great player, but he has a reputation for two things. One, for being always a great player, always totally reliable, and practiced all the time. He used to say that he only practiced 1 hour on Christmas Day. Every other day he practiced for 2 hours a day. You know, who on earth wants to practice for 1 hour on Christmas Day? That's the sort of guy that McCann is. He's different, and he's special. He's special. But if you want to go down that route of speciality, I don't know. I wouldn't like to do so. He's dedicated his life to playing, to the point of rehearsing all the time, and flawless. But there's more to life for many people than that. Jim, you asked me to compare the two. Jim would play, he would practice, he was pleased to put his cornet down and close the lid and then become Jim Shepherd person. Philip wants to keep his cornet and become Philip McCann, cornet player extraordinaire, and he is. And all the baggage that goes with that dedication, he still carries around to this day. And some people will be prepared to sacrifice so much for that, and other people wouldn't. Very different characters, What do you want to do in life? Do you want to make something of your life? Do you want the opportunity to travel, to get experiences beyond your imagination, to see great things, to offer? You've got to want to offer something to people. The offer that you're giving is the skill of music for others to appreciate. It's not about take, it's about giving. And by giving, it's no cliche, but by giving, you get so much back. I think modern day, it's all about I want it now, because we've had it at home with my parents. I want it now, and I can do this quickly if I do that. But if you work hard, you do get your rewards, and you do get the benefits. You get the travel, you get the excitement, you get the satisfaction. You do give, and by giving you get so much back. So if youngsters want to get into music, it's a great life. It's a great life. You have to forfeit things. You have to forfeit things. As I said earlier, that as a youngster, I could play with anything as long as it was a cornet. And then if there was time, I could go and play with the football. So you do have to give things up, but you get things back. So be patient, work hard. There's no secret remedy to this. You work hard, you try like mad, and just keep going. And don't ever get selfish as to what you want. I want, gets you nothing in the end. If you're prepared to work hard and give, you get a lot back.
Anything else?
My life would have been very different without Black Dyke, without music, without bands, without being born into a brass band family. I'm very grateful for it, and hopefully I've got lots of things to do at the moment. I'm in the transition now from playing to, I didn't always have a bald head and grey beard. There was a time. But now I'm into adjudicating. I've 52 years since my first Royal Albert Hall national final, and it's probably time now that I should be listening critically and analytically to performances rather than trying to contribute to them as a player. As a conductor, it would be nice. As an adjudicator, it's lovely. So the maturity of musical life continues, and that's where I am. And it's all down to the great teachings that went on in this room. Black Dyke.